When things feel a bit chaotic, Instacart helps deliver milk and sausage. Add a little life to your cart. Get stuff from literally all your stores, from baby wipes to albacore. Add a little life to your cart. Instacart helps get your groceries. Your first 3 deliveries are free.
Download Instacart. Add life to cart. Terms apply.
Percolate on a particular mix of odd and inspiring news headlines in Wendy's Coffee House. Newsmakers with a penchant for the unknown, unexplained, and unusual share their experiences with UFOs, ghost encounters, near-death experiences, and more for your own unique blend of Wendy's Coffee House Curious. And now, here's Wendy.
Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. Thank you so much for listening. I had an opportunity recently to sit down with a guy and talk about his experience he had, like for 4 decades, ET contact. From the 50s, there were all these contactees. Well, John Foster is one of them, and he's in his 80s now and able to share his story. Huge health fallout as a result of remembering that contact, multiple heart attacks. So that's part of the history that he had when he found out that, yes, this had been ongoing and had been decades and multiple times and multiple types of encounters. So it's a fascinating story. I don't know of any other story that compares to his at this point. So I'm so fortunate that he agreed to do this interview. I hope you enjoy it because this is a fascinating perspective on reality that a lot of people don't get to see. John Foster. John, I am so glad. Thank you very much for talking with me because you have an absolutely astounding story.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Wendy, because you have a lot of insight, and most people really don't want to hear about this. My case is a little bit different than most in the respect that I didn't really know what was going on until I was 48 years old, and that was 1986. And I was outside on the patio one night, and during the 80s, I would have strange feelings that I knew something was going on, and I actually had those feelings all my life, but they were stronger in the 80s. So I was outside on the patio, and I saw the city lights reflecting from the clouds up above, and it just really made me uncomfortable. And so I went in and went to bed, and I remembered that some people remembered their UFO encounters after being hypnotized, so I decided I would try to concentrate and remember if I had ever had an encounter, and almost immediately a picture flashed in my mind's eye, and I saw a windowed saucer flying above me, and so I tried to understand what happened before that and after that, and it was a chain reaction, and there was just a flood of memory that started to come back about that encounter, and that was at the Bethany Grade School playground here in Lincoln, Nebraska. That encounter is Chapter 2 in the Imminent Discovery Volume 1, if anybody's interested. And there were several things that just shocked me because it indicated that we had a contact with beings and crafts and strange objects that we don't normally see. And to give you an example, during that Bethany encounter, there was a crowd of 30 to 50 people there, and the craft, to make a long story short, the craft hovered above us, and the voice started speaking to us from the craft. And he said that they were going to take 5 or 6 of us aboard, but not to be afraid because they could make us forget the experience if that's what we wanted. And then he introduced the first person that they were going to take up, and it was a young gal who had just graduated from college, a nearby college, and she waved and smiled, and then he introduced a couple more people, And it was as if they had dealt with them in the past up the street, where she lived. And I was eventually taken up, and I won't go through the whole story. There's extreme detail in Chapter 2.
Okay.
Anyways, I was put on an examination table, and they told me, among other things, that I would have heart attacks and heart surgeries in the future, and that the veins in my legs would have something to do with it, which has happened now. That was 30. I think it was 38 years later. I did have my first massive heart attack and heart surgery, and I eventually lost over half my heart, but that was in 88.
Wow.
And so I survived since then.
Yeah.
For 30 years, and I've just seen one of my cardiologists, and he said, "Well, you have more than beat the odds that you're a miracle."
Yes.
So I've lived a lot longer than most people after more than half my heart was destroyed. Anyway, so the way it happened, rather than starting at my when I was 2 or 3 years old, which was my first recollections, and possibly before that, because I can remember an encounter where I had diapers on, and our car stopped, and we saw a luminous craft out in the field next to us. Okay, so going back to 1986, then I struggled with this from early September until August. My wife and I took a trip, and I started remembering more. It tells the story in Volume 1 how this all happened. And then from October, November 86 through February of 87, I just had a flood of memory. It was completely overwhelming, and I would have recollections of other different encounters from the time I woke up until I fell asleep at night. And this even included recollections that when I was an engineer, as an applications engineer, and I was, of course, supposed to be working, and a lot of my memories took up my time at work, which really wasn't fair to my friend, the owner of the business.
Yeah.
What I remembered is extremely complex and lengthy, and it involves humankind since our very beginnings. It's much more. I was raised as a Christian, and I'm still a Christian. Probably have more faith than most people because I have facts to back up what's written in the Bible, sometimes in extreme detail.
The experiences that you had, they could manifest out of nothing, out of the fog. All of a sudden, this would be present. And there are multiple witnesses, but only a few remember. You talk about the grade school experience. There's also a football stadium experience. And that's what's so fascinating is that, as you describe it, some people saw it, other people continued doing what they were doing, and some people were engaged. It was the whole spectrum of being there and completely oblivious.
Well, let me explain one of the football encounters. It was a very simple encounter. My wife and I were at a Nebraska football game in the stadium, and it was a timeout on the field, and I looked over. We were in the end zone near one of the corners, and I looked over in the corner above the people. There was a manifestation of fog that took place, and it was like a hissing roar. It gradually began to dissipate, and there was a craft. It was what I call a dish-shaped craft with headlights, 2 headlights on the front, and it manifested above the people, and I could see that the people were looking at it and pointing to it. There was a roar over there, finally. Then the craft started moving in our direction out in front of us, and we were about halfway up on the stadium. I could see people in front of me pointing at it and asking their neighbor what that was. And so I pointed to it, and I asked again, "What is that?" And she says, "I don't know what it is." And so we kept looking, and it went over to our right, and then it started going up over the stadium above the heads of people. It was about, I would say, 10 foot to 15 foot above the people. and it finally disappeared over the stadium. And during that time, or before, or after that time, I can't remember which right now, but they had called a timeout on the field, and there was a fog that developed on the field, and I believe there was a craft that momentarily manifested, and the referee called it another timeout, and they waited until the fog cleared from the field, and then they started playing football again. And I thought that was shocking. Why wouldn't people really be interested in what's happening? Anyway, we left the stadium, and as we were walking out, there was a fellow that was talking to his comrades, and he was asking what in the heck that was. And so we stopped and talked to him about it for a time. And then we went on about, to go home, and we never did hear anything about it in the newspapers or anything like that. And this sort of thing happened many, many times throughout my life, and I'm sure it happened to people also.
John Foster, 4 decades of UFO experiences with witnesses and detailed drawings. Wendy's Coffee House, back in a few, KCMO Talk Radio. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. My guest is John Foster. And the thing about this is one of the experiences he had, he was basically in a place where he was ambushed by a bunch of young boys. This is when he was a teenager. And the ETs actually showed up and ran interference. And the cool thing is, every time one of the kids was belligerent, then the ET gave that same attention right back at the kid. Whether they remembered or not, who knows? He doesn't have that information. But the fact that he had that extraordinary backup is incredible. So we don't have time to get into that. But that's what some of this is about, is all of these things that he can remember that happened in the presence of others. And in that one instance, he did get a huge assist because it was a setup. He was going to be beaten up, and he had a friend. And when this happened, they were able to get out of it. So that's what we're continuing and picking up on here. John Foster, UFOs, this is very unusual. You had a backup that many of us don't know about.
Yeah, it kind of still bothers me because they won't show up again, and I want them to come land in the backyard and walk over and let's sit on the patio and have a cup of coffee, and you explain to me, what this is all about. Even though I know a great deal about what it's all about, but I had one last experience. And I got extremely angry. It was at Maloney Lake at the campground south of North Platte, Nebraska. And to make a long story short, the voice asked me why I was so angry, and I told him, well, it was because I couldn't remember the experiences, and it was ruining my more normal life. And as the conversation went on, he said, well, we don't want you, he used the word we, said, we don't want you to remember because it would negate the purpose of the encounters. And then after a short period of time, they gave me a choice. They said I could choose to remember and not continue the experiences, or not remember and continue the experiences, because that's what they preferred, because I hadn't developed enough my metaphysical and spiritual talents to be able to carry out my task. Mm-hmm. And, of course, later I found what my task was through recollection, but even during that last encounter, they levitated me out over the lake, and I saw 3 people that seemed somewhat familiar, and a large building manifested also out of the lake, out over the lake. It was a masonry building, which is impossible. And so I remember the voice talking to me at that time, trying to get me to decision. And I thought to myself, almost out loud, that, well, I don't have to do anything at all. I can just ignore him, And so that's what I chose to do. And then that was in the summer of 1986, after I had my first recollection of the Bethany grade school encounter. And we went on to the Tetons in Wyoming and Du Bois, which was a small city where I worked when I was younger, and we had friends there. I did logging and worked for the Forest Service and broke and trained horses. 1956, 1957, and this was in, of course, 1986. Anyway, I started recalling more at that time, but then we went home and we had another trip, and I remembered more and more and more, and then finally in November I just flooded in. And then one of the extreme important things to remember is that after I had recalled all of this in late February, early March, in that spring, I don't know if it was August or April or May, you'll have to read the details, but I went to Shirley MacLaine's friend who Shirley wrote Out on the Limb.
Yeah. Yes.
And I met her friend that had been with her in South America, and he talked about UFOs and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
I walked into the auditorium and I started recognizing people all around me. And it was so freaky that I got up, and my daughter was with me with a friend, and I got up and stood at the side of the auditorium and tried to look at these people and try to remember who they were. Anyway, I couldn't, and we didn't have a chance to talk to Shirley's friend, but I went home and had more recollections and discovered I had time travels into the future. And nearly every time there was a craft that would show up, and there would be the same human individuals on board, and we would fly off to specific location or locations, different locations, but primarily one location where we were shown and told what we were to do in the future. And it involved a vast ET human project that involved other people, of course. And one of my jobs eventually I learned was to help with the construction, the design, the construction, and maintenance of some of the buildings. And the buildings were housing units. They were what they called spiritual learning centers, and so forth. And one of the first buildings we were to construct was a high school for Central Americans or people that came across the southern border, especially orphans. And the group that is to help did the teaching, supplying of clothes and food, and housing. So after this Shirley MacLaine's friends talk, my daughter called me one day. She was living in eastern Nebraska, and she worked with the gal who heard my story, and she wanted to meet me. So she met me, and at that time she explained that I needed to meet with these people that she knew that got together weekly to improve themselves, and that some of them had similar encounters that I did. So later that week, my daughter and I drove to the area, and we drove up to the building, and it just freaked me out because I recognized the building and the landscape around the building, and we were to go to the first meeting, or our first meeting with these people. And it bothered me so much I took off, and I told my daughter I couldn't, something's wrong. I can't do it. Mm-hmm. But I mustered my courage, and we pulled up in the parking lot, went into the building, and I started recognizing the rooms in the building, but no one was there. And all of a sudden, I knew where to go, and I told my daughter to follow me, and we walked through 2 or 3 different rooms and opened a closed door, and there were about 12 different people sitting inside. We got to talking. I recognized almost everyone in the room. Mm. Some of them recognized me, and we started exchanging stories. And then, of course, they asked me to come back during their meetings, and so I did. And I brought some of my drawings and so forth. A couple of the people recognized the drawing of the first building we are to construct and so forth, and was shocked to find out they were already adopting Central American orphans and putting them in families, and different families were adopting them, and they were providing education, housing, and food, of course.
And that's exactly what the ETs had told John about prior to all of this happening. So it really is an incredible scenario. We're going to come back and ask John what it feels like with today's headlines. Wendy's Coffee House. And again, if you miss any of this, I'll put the details and links on the website, John Foster UFOs. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. Talking with my guest, John Foster, johnfosterufos.com. That's the website, about his experiences, and mind-blowing. In the books, you say you have been shown other things, and because you changed your program, they may not play out. But what can you share about the future that you have seen that still is basically on the table?
Basically, the project, I've met people from all over the world who have had encounters, okay? Mm-hmm. And there are organizations set up to understand more about the spiritual side of life, you might say. It, of course, goes along with a lot of the things that you have written about and spoke about. However, it's diverse, and I figure, I was in research and development, so I look at things very objectively, and I don't accept things that are not rational or have some kind of evidence that it's true, okay? Mm-hmm. I read Zachariah Sitchin's Earth Chronicles, and it was sort of a godsend to me because it was a story about ETs developing the world and aiding the creation of humankind.
Yes.
And essentially that's what I was told twice. I was told that they had helped with the creation of humankind using something similar to test tubes. And so when you think about genetic engineering and so forth, and the Bethany Grade School encounter, for instance, Chapter 2 of Human Discovery, suggests that they indeed are doing genetic engineering now and mm-hmm. probably have been throughout the centuries. And, of course, they did originally to create the first man and woman. Now, that people are afraid of that because it seems to contradict what's written in the Bible, but I maintain that it doesn't, that it just expands on the knowledge of what is really going on, that there is a God, there is, and you could call him the Father God, and there was the Son which is Christ, and he was the Son of God that came to earth and to explain to people more about reality and what you shouldn't kill your neighbor, in other words.
Yes.
And you should treat other people as you would like to have them treat you, and so forth. So if you read just not necessarily consume everything that's in the Bible, but if you read the words of Christ, it brings you towards closer to the total truth of what's going on. I need to tell about the experience at the Sheridan Creek Fire Guard Cabin in 1957. A friend of mine were working as fire guards there, and we had one lengthy encounter where they actually told us what it was all about, and there was no symbolism or vagueness about what they said or what we saw. Mm-hmm. And essentially they said they were the monitors or keepers of the earth who were responsible to a hierarchy that included the archangels Michael and Gabriel, who we would refer to as Michael and Gabriel, who were responsible to the entity who we have known as Christ, who is in charge of this corner of our universe. So now you can accept all that. They didn't talk about the Father, the Creator of the universe, except you can extrapolate all kinds of things to assume that that is absolutely true. And part of the mystery is that I don't know if you're familiar with the Masonic order or not.
Vaguely, but yes.
Okay, well, a lot of people think that it's evil and so forth, but I am a Mason. Before I had my recollections, I became a Mason, and I can tell you that it's one of the best sources for men, especially, to become civilized and kind and generous and so forth. That's the main thrust of the order, the Masonic order. Okay, and women are involved, of course, and I'm not trying to sell this at all because I'm an active member, just like I'm an inactive Christian. I don't go to church much. Some of the best I used to get together with the Familiar Strangers, and we found, even in the talks I've given around the country, there was always a battle on who was the best source or knowledge about who was the most prominent person or could be the most prominent person in the UFO discussion. And it sort of just made me sick, so I backed away. It's sort of a diversion. In other words, there are a lot of spiritual people also that know the answers, and they're sure they know the answers, and there's a lot of people that wanted to heal me, and of course in the New Age movement in the late 90s and early 2000s, there was a lot of healers around. They wanted to heal. Well, some of it was genuine and some of it was not so genuine, so I decided, of course, along with my decision to back away from the project, is that I would, I always wanted, my mother taught me when I was very, very young to live by the truth, whatever the truth was, okay? So I always sought out the truth, what was real and what was not real. So I backed away from, I gave my last talk at the Psychic Studies Institute in Unity Temple on the square in Kansas City. But at that time, our kids remembered encounters, and so I asked them if they would be willing to witness for what they saw and how they felt and so forth. And so our three kids went down with us, and they gave a spiel about the Dillon Lake experience, which all three of them remember parts of it.
Yes.
And it's pretty profound. I mean, even though some of their memories are short memories of different episodes, but it's when they told me that they heard the voice speaking to us and when they saw the craft and how it looked and so forth, I knew in 86 that I knew that what I was remembering was true and accurate.
KCMO Talk Radio. John Foster has so much information. We're just touching, this is like the tip of the iceberg of the content that he has. He has drawings. I even bought one of the drawings. This is of a UFO that appears out of a cloud. Extraordinary content. John Foster, UFOs, and the books available at Amazon. Now, there is a longer version of this interview on the website, on Wendy's Coffee House in the archives, so you can check that out too. This is the edited version, and John was gracious enough to allow me to do this. In the meantime, this is one of the few interviews he's done in recent years, so I'm so fortunate that he was healthy enough and really, really excited about doing the interview. If you're interested in connecting with John, again, the website is the best place. John Foster UFOs. He also does artwork, and he has the drawings that you can order one of his drawings, like I did. They're pretty fantastic, but unbelievable, the experiences he had over the 4 decades he was in contact with the ETs. And when we talked about that ET earlier intervening when he was in a situation where he was ambushed by a bunch of other teenagers, that was actually like a little orb-type ET. It wasn't a being. It was a vehicle of some kind. Again, a fascinating story. Back in a few. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio, with my guest, John Foster. For anyone who wants more information, the Eminent Discovery books, Volume 1, Volume 2, the To Earth from Heaven, there's also a book that has just the pictures in it. The other thing is your website, for people who need some cliff notes to get started and some places to dive in. I love the featured UFO story, The Holographic Universe, Chapter 13 from the book To Earth from Heaven, and that really, I think, speaks to where we are here and now.
If you put your fingertips together and your thumb tips and you lower them and look through them to the floor, you'll see that you have many more fingertips than what you normally see. It's an exercise that you could do to kind of hone in on other dimensional realities.
Oh, that's a nice little cheat. Yes. Okay, so a tool to basically.
Yeah, you try it, and you'll see your eyes kind of go out of focus a little bit. But if you try to concentrate on the floor, and then notice your fingertips, there's let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There would be 16 fingertips and 4 thumb tips.
You've expanded your awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah. And see, people would say, well, you're making it up. That's an illusion. No, actually, that's a reality. You just expanded your reality.
You try it and see what you see.
Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap?
Oh, I could go on forever. If I were to tell you the good story and all the implications, the main story and the total story and all the implications, I would have to talk for a year or more.
You've had a lifetime to deal with these, though, and that's what's so fantastic is that your longevity and the way that you've been able to connect the dots of this for other people, this is going to be extremely helpful and in a lot of ways revealing, because there's so much more going on here that our human abilities don't pick up.
They gave me a choice, and I figured that because I chose not to participate in the project unless they show up again, that my assignment is to get the word out and write the books. They told me I would write books, as a matter of fact, but they said that most people wouldn't read them because they wouldn't be interested in UFOs.
Hey, I counter that. I read them. I've got them all. I've got them bookmarked. I didn't write in them. I put my little sticky notes on this different pages, and they're nice and wrinkled now. So.
Well, I really appreciate you because this is a real treat for me. I don't normally get to talk about it.
There's a reason for all of this. So I appreciate you doing what you're doing, and your story is so incredibly necessary. I can't say that enough.
Well, it's strange. They would follow me on the football field when I played football. They would show up at the game where, let's see, I just thought of an encounter the other day that, the YMCA camp. If they were delighted that I was at the YMCA camp, and that's the one where the light shone down on me, and they could see my bones through my flesh.
Yes, the X-ray.
Anyway, they followed me all through that time at the camp, and it was as if they were overseeing my development.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And, of course, if you look at the Bethany Grade School encounter, other people, the same thing is happening with other people.
Absolutely. We're all connected in different ways. And at the level I think that we can allow, and yours, for that shock that you had with your physical body, the mental body, trying to integrate that and going, holy cow, and it cracked, okay? That you survived. They told you that would happen, but then your recovery and your response was totally up to you. So
one thing I remember thinking it was either early 1987 or late 1987 is after I got most of the information and understood what happened, I thought to myself, it's going to take me at least 10 years because I was a research and development engineer.
Yeah.
Understand what this is all about.
Yes.
And it took, of course, 10 years.
Yes. John, my own experiences, I had a shift in 1997, and my night lights still light up 24/7. Every day I've got one beside my bed, and it's plugged into an extension, a surge protector. Okay. And my night light does its blinking on and off thing in the surge protector. And it went dark for October, and I'm like, oh, no, 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 don't do this to me. And it's been going for like 20 years. And it does this occasionally just to see if I'm paying attention and how much I'll freak out. And I'm like, no, don't burn out. No, no. And so after a few weeks of being completely not nightlighty, then it starts blinking again, like, ha, 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 ha. And my husband knows this stuff, so when he sees it, he said, it's neon. It's not supposed to do that. When it first started, I would be up at 2:00 in the middle of the night looking at it blink in the other room going, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. So something that simple to get me just so excited about life, I'm easily entertained.
You started working at night, and I used to stay up all night and try to figure it out.
Yes. Well, and then I learned to channel. I learned to listen to them. It's a telepathic connect. Things are happening right now as more people are telling their stories. Everyone has a story, and that's how we connect our dots.
The best way to get a handle on the story is to go to johnfosterufos.com and scroll down and watch the video of a talk I gave to the 2001 UFO conference convention in Laughlin, Nevada.
Okay.
And I covered 6 months on that presentation. I did a lot of the drawings for that, and it explains pretty much in detail the different types of craft and the different types of men. There were a lot of times there would be a strange man that would walk up, or we would find standing beside us, and he would start explaining what was going on and so forth at those times when the craft also showed up. And then there were what I call the lizard-like beings, and I have drawings of that. Mm-hmm. They normally piloted the craft, and they actually taught me how to fly the craft 2 or 3 times by thinking it forward, so which indicates a different reality, you might say, mm-hmm. that's on our reality. Also, what might help your listeners understand a little more is that my father and I were hunting one time, and we saw what I call the large booth in behind Milo Field, I believe it was. And so we stopped, and the car stopped. Actually, we didn't stop. Our car stopped, and the door flung open, and there were beings. I don't know if I actually saw them or if it was just the voices that I heard, but they told us we had to get out and we had to go do something. They didn't really tell us. And so we started moving, not of our own accord, and we were close to them because we could hear them talking. And so I decided I would try to escape, and I moved off away from them, and they sort of laughed at me and told me that I couldn't, because I didn't know what was going on, and I wouldn't survive if I didn't stick with them. Kind of a long story, and we had an out-of-body experience during that encounter, and they showed me and told me how they could manipulate the craft or create the craft by manipulating the atomic and molecular structure of matter. I assume from the molecules and atoms of the haze and fog, mm-hmm. because at times we would see what I call the coffin-shaped object sitting on the ground, and several times we went up and tried to touch it, and our hands went through it, and we felt a mild electric shock. And then it would move off, and the voice would talk to us, and we would see the lights and so forth.
John Foster, UFO experiencer from the time he was a child, in his 80s now. This is the first interview he's given in a long time, several years, and he did mention that you can go to his website and check out the video, the YouTube video of his story. I think he said that was 2001. So fantastic story, first-hand account. He's in his 80s. This is absolutely a tremendous opportunity to hear from somebody who's had ongoing experiences and gives you some of the details in the backstory. UFOs, some people will see them, some people can't see them, and that's what makes it so curious and compelling. I'll add links on the website to this information. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to him. He has so much content and so much information with drawings and backup witnesses. An incredible story. Thank you for listening. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio.
I'm at the football game. I'm at the grocery store. What? I'm at the combination football game and grocery store.
Wait, you're at the football game
What?
and the grocery store?
Nah, I'm at the combination football game and grocery store. Groceries through Instacart, delivered to my door. I don't have to choose between football and the grocery store.
We get our weekly groceries delivered through Instacart because once football season starts, game time is family time. I can get everything my family needs for the week, from reliable staples to specialty ingredients, all delivered right to my door in as fast as 1 hour. So I can stay on my game without missing a minute of the game. Visit instacart.com or download the app to get free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum order $10. Additional terms apply. Instacart. Add life to cart.